Hello all! So, way back when I was but a fledgling neckbeard, I did a video, my first live video in fact, on terrifying Silent Hill enemies and what they mean. Fantastic shirt choice, young me. Oh, if only you knew what you know now. Designing fear is a subject that I love discussing with anyone who will listen, and more often than not with those that won't listen but are chained to my radiator. As the amount of love poured into enemy, character and world design is often truly impressive and therefore truly terrifying. So seeing as we're all full to bursting with Xmas glut, let's scare the shit out of ourselves and drop some weight. With this in mind, I'm JulesWhatCulture.com and these are the 8 most terrifying video game enemies and what they represent. Number 8. The Child, Catherine. One of the most underrated games of the last generation, Catherine's strange brand of psychological horror and puzzle platforming made it a difficult sell for the majority of players, which is a shame considering that it told one of the most emotionally powerful and nightmarishly evocative narratives gaming has ever seen. With each level being a metaphorical representation of main character Vincent's relationship with the titular Catherine, the third boss took the abstract theme to terrifying new heights. Beginning after Catherine tells Vince that she might actually be pregnant, the latter faces off against a huge mechanical baby with a chainsaw for an arm. Clearly representing the character's fear of parenthood, the child constantly attempts to trap the father, acting as a violent manifestation of Vincent's fear of losing his freedom thanks to his new parental responsibilities. Going deeper though, the mechanical skeleton is also a projection of the protagonist's anxiety that the baby might not actually be his, as the mechanical shell underneath serves to symbolize that appearances can often be misleading. Then we have to look at the array of mental weapons the baby possesses. Teeth in the eyes, a gun in the mouth, and obviously the chainsaw arm all serve as the dangers that Vincent perceives that they can do to his life. If we take this even further, the chainsaw and the claw arms might also be a horrible desire of Vincent's to get rid of the baby, the appendages becoming representative of abortion. Fun stuff. Number 7. BEAUVOIR, NIER AUTOMATA. BEAUVOIR, aka Simone, is one of the first big bosses you come across in NIER AUTOMATA. Shacking up in a theatre and putting on her own twisted performances for enslaved robots, Simone yearns to be beautiful and adorns herself in an extravagant dress and garish accessories. However, her violent desire to be perfect is actually pretty tragic, and the robot has taken to cannibalizing her own kind in order to fit the perfect definition of beauty that her former lover demanded, swapping out her parts for more appealing ones. Driven mad in the process, the player is forced to put her down and stop her twisted conquest. The sheer spectacle makes it a memorable boss fight in its own right, but it resonates so much because it's such an on-the-nose allegory for modern-day society's obsession with fitting an ideal image of beauty that doesn't exist. I mean, we should all be bold, right? I mean, that's beautiful, isn't it? Reflecting how unrealistic demands can result in a whole population feeling uncomfortable with their own body, Simone is a tragic reminder of how dangerous any cultural obsession with appearances can be. Number 6. KUNINO-SAGIRI, Persona 4 Golden. The result of Shadows merging with suspected murderer and confirmed kidnapper Namatame, who is then possessed by the Japanese god of fog KUNINO-SAGIRI. I mean, this guy's not having a good day. This late-game boss is one of the weirdest parts of Persona 4 Golden. Unlike most villains, Namatame acted fully in the belief that what he was doing was right, abducting potential victims targeted by the actual killer and taking them to another world with the twisted logic that he would be keeping them safe. Funnily enough, this oblivious to how evil his actions were allowed him to be possessed by the god, who is adorned in peace symbols and in myth is known as the protector and savior of mankind. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and the design and lore behind KUNINO-SAGIRI perfectly reflects how bad people can perform terrible actions in the name of peace, love, and all things good. Number 5. The Mother, The Binding of Isaac. Intentionally obtuse and abstract, The Binding of Isaac is more of an excuse to blast away imaginative enemies and roll the dice on procedurally generated levels than a narrative-driven game. However, there is a thematic thread to follow, with the game's main thrust coming from Isaac's religious mother being told by a voice that her son is full of sin and trying to kill him. Consequently, the levels themselves see Isaac battling against deformed versions of himself as well as other objects from his childhood, reflecting the character's self-flagellation as he attempts to rid himself of the sin inside him. However, it's the mother boss who comes with the biggest symbolic backstory. Represented in-game as a disembodied leg, hand, and eye, which is usually the extent of what I see when I'm bedding one of your mothers, such as their lust for my man dust, the enemy design not only reflects Isaac's obsessive and controlling mother who stifles his creativity, but the game's positioning of religion itself as an omniscient and regulating entity. To top it off, the religious motif comes to a head if you use the Bible item on the boss, which instantly kills her by tapping into her biggest fear, the hypocrisy that she's not as good or moralistic as she thinks she is. Number 4. The Reapers, Mass Effect. Now, I don't know about you, but I found the Reapers in Mass Effect to be utterly terrifying. A collective of floating mecha space squids straight out of Lovecraft's ramblings with the sole intent of cleansing the galaxy again and again, forever, definitely kept me up at night. They're technologically superior, possess vast numbers, and can even indoctrinate organic life into believing their process of wiping the slate clean is right and will fight to make it happen. Basically, all in all, it's not a good thing whenever they show up. However, when it comes to why they look as they do, there is much more than because they look cool and sketchy, yo. It's actually because ages ago, a race called the Leviathans made an AI to help keep organic and synthetic creatures from fighting each other, and obviously, it went about as well as putting Josh Brown in a room with a sheep and saying, keep your hands to yourself. As a result, the design of these Reapers came from its new AI taking the form of its creators as it assimilated them, and they've gone on to reset the galaxy many times over, which has been fun times for all. Number 3. Shadows, Deadly Premonition. At first, these enemies appear about as threatening as a crocheting session with your nan, being slow, stupid, and even appearing to offer up their heads on a platter for you as they walk backwards into your gunfire. However, it's when you stop and listen to them that things take a rather wiggy turn. They constantly moan in pain and offer up apologies for attacking you, begging to die and pleading with you to hurt them. If you look into the game's backstory, you'll find that these poor souls are actually the victims of a poisonous gas released into the area which filled them with violent rage. Now, trapped as spirits in the strange limbo of deadly premonition, they are forced to attack by the Raincoat Killer. Their cries are that of the human soul still alive in the possessed body, not wanting to hurt you, and their strange stance is them trying to fight their orders, turning away from you but being too weak to resist the power of their puppet master. Number 2. The Gatherers, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. With a face that only a mother could love and a dress sense that I all but encourage at home, the Gatherers who haunt the walls of Amnesia: The Dark Descent have a rather deep backstory which informs their horrific design. More than just nameless monsters, each enemy is actually the remains of a former soldier who deserted their station and made a run for it into the woods, only to be transformed into these creatures as a punishment. With their gruesome appearance being the result of drinking poisoned wine which caused internal ruptures when ingested, the Gatherers' swinging dislodged jaws and bloated limbs are essentially down to their bodies exploding from the inside out. More than that, it was only the strong-willed soldiers attempting to rebel who were stripped of their autonomy and turned into slaves, being literally dehumanized through their new grotesque forms. It's never established whether or not they're actually dead either, with the implication being that they're doomed to haunt the castle while they're still somewhat aware of who they used to be. Either way, as anyone who's eaten too much of a Sunday roast can attest, having a dicky belly is no joke, and this looks to be even worse than that. The horror. And number 1, Laura, the Evil Within. The Evil Within might have its issues in the gameplay department, but it's so packed with symbolism when it comes to the enemies that the players face off against. The game's secondary antagonist, anamorphic beast of claws and hair known as Laura, is much more than a throwaway monster inspired by classic Japanese horror films. The game's enemies are actually manifestations of the main baddie's psyche, and Laura is no exception, being a vengeful version of this man's sister who is out for revenge for her unjust death at the hands of some villagers in a barn fire. The boss's constant screaming is a manifestation of his last memory of her as she burned to death, while her patchy melted skin and vulnerability to fire clearly reflects her untimely demise. However, the newly grotesque and virtually invincible body that Laura now sports is supposed to reflect the strength that he always saw in his sister, functioning as his own sick way of allowing her to pursue the revenge that she desires. And that's our list. Got any other terrifying enemies with underlying meanings? Well, let me know about them in the comments section below. And then why not swing by whatculture.com for more news and articles like this every goddamn day. As always, I've been Jules, you've been awesome, and I'll speak to you soon.